You're listening to a download from the outdoorstation.co.uk. Number 383.
Hello and welcome to the fourth in the series of the Wild Camp Challenge, where I, over a period from the end of 2014 to October 2015, attempt to do a wild camp a month, doing something different each time. My name's Bob Cartwright and you're listening to the Outdoor Station. And I set this challenge towards the end of last year to encourage me to get out more and get back to doing the basics and enjoying the basics, and also encourage other people to do that as well. And certainly from the emails and the feedback we've had and the downloads, people are really enjoying this series. Very early on, we had an email from someone, I think from America actually, somebody in America, who suggested that we should mix a little bit of landscape and a little bit of history along with the adventure. And that is exactly what I've done this time. It's getting towards the end of January 2015. It's a bit cold at the moment, and I have headed southeast from our base up in central England, down to an area which is ancient beyond belief, really. I've only visited a couple of times, and even then I've not really spent the time absorbing some of the information that's here. It is absolutely amazing. We are at the Neolithic site of Avebury. Now, in the Avebury area, visiting some of the famous and discovered, well-known Neolithic sites on my route up to Wild Camp. I've parked in a little village called East Kennet, and from there I've made my way to the first of the sites that we're going to look at, which is the West Kennet Barrow. Which is believed to be, as I say, back in 2400 BC. So we're looking around 4,500 years this barrow was built. And it's a sizable operation. And that's where I'm currently resting, trying to keep out of the wind. Afterwards, I hope to go down to Silbury Hill, which is not very far away, but it's a very muddy underfoot, so it's a bit of a slog to get there. Which is another English heritage ancient site, which has a lot of history attached to it. Then go into Avebury. Now, Avebury is wonderful, and what I want to do is spend some time there, but I am actually running out of light, as usual, with my wild camping. So I'm going to go through Avebury, up onto the Ridgeway, which is a national trail, and go along the Ridgeway until I can find a suitable spot to camp. And then tomorrow morning, hopefully early, we're going to make my way back to Avebury and spend a bit more time there. It's just above freezing now. It's very, very cold. The forecast tonight is a frost and snow at some stage, or a smattering of snow. So I've got that to look forward to, along with my bedding down in my bivvy bag and tarp. The West Kennet Barrow is one of the largest and best preserved chambered tombs in Britain, and apparently it was in use for over 1,000 years. Carbon dating from some of the bones that have been pottery that's been found inside date it back to 3,700 and 3,500 BC, so that's 5,500 years ago. Basically, for our overseas visitors, our overseas listeners, you're looking at tombs, if you like, which are surrounded by extremely large stone rocks, and then it is covered in earth. And this is one of the biggest in the country. It's about 328 feet in length, that's about 100 metres, and the stone chambers extend to only 40 feet of that. So this is this long tump of earth, as it would appear, with big stone presence at the front, and then it's covered up, and so people were buried in there over the years. And apparently carbon dating dates that these tombs were actually in use from when it was built in 3700 BC right through to the late 3rd millennium, about 2000 BC. It apparently, they reckon, had a ditch that ran around the sides of it longitudinally, and they were anything up to 12 feet deep. They've excavated some of the soil part of the barrow and found that contained wooden and hurdle divisions, providing separate areas for burial. But the bulk of the earthen mound has yet to be investigated. Of course, I've taken a few photographs which will be on the Outdoor Station website, and even just being here for the last half hour or so, the sun has really changed its position, so I better crack on, otherwise I'm going to be pitching my tarp again in darkness. I might just briefly pass by Silbury Hill. I'll give you some information about that nearby. Again, I've taken some pictures of that, dash through Avebury and get up onto the Ridgeway, which is one of the other national trails. But I'll fill you in with more later. It's now just turning 5:30, and I'm glad to say that I have found a spot just off the Ridgeway to pitch my tarp and get myself sorted before the dusk is upon us, and it's getting pretty dark now. I've got my head torch on to see what I'm doing. I did pretty well, as I explained earlier. Once I left the barrow, I had to unfortunately do the recording outside the barrow because I was about to do it inside because it's open. You can actually have access to the chambers and these huge great stones which somehow got transported to the top of a hill. But unfortunately a gang of people, visitors, tourists has arrived, and obviously it was not compatible with the recording. So I had to sit outside and do it, and unfortunately the process got very, very cold very, very quickly. So I left there, headed down the hill. Now, the one thing about this area and some of the discoveries they've made in obviously checking out these barrows and earthworks and stones, it is very, very clay soil. It's very chalk and clay soil, which means actually going across these paths, they're all agricultural fields, of course, now, with just a path across them, is hard going. The clay just sticks to your feet, and I'm slipping and sliding all over the place, falling over a couple of times as well. But I did come down the hill. I went past Silbury Hill, which I'll go and have a look at if I can tomorrow, more detail, take a bit more time on that. Came into Avebury. Once again, you just can't get over the size of Avebury Stones and the stone circles and the fact that it encompasses a complete village. But again, I'll try and explain that more tomorrow and take some more photographs for people that have never heard of it or never seen or perhaps live overseas. It's a fascinating site, and it does really make you think. Went through there and took the path out of Avebury to get up onto the Ridgeway, and again it was an agricultural route, and there were tractors doing various things there, so I was wading ankle deep in slurry and mud, which is not conducive to the most pleasant walking style. But anyway, eventually made it to the Ridgeway. It is a national trail, as I say. It stretches 85 miles in all, starting from Overton Hill near Avebury, just down the road from here, to Ivinghoe Beacon near Tring in Buckinghamshire. And it's been used, they estimate, for over 5,000 years by many different groups of people, as you can imagine: travellers, farmers, armies, tourists, backpackers. During Saxon and Viking times, the Ridgeway was useful to provide a track along which to move soldiers into Wessex. In the medieval period, apparently, the route would have been utilised by drovers moving animals down to the market. And the Enclosures Act of 1750 meant that the Ridgeway became more permanent and the route clearer, becoming a national trail, of course, in 1973, along with 14 others. So it's an established route. It's fairly good underfoot, actually, once you're on the Ridgeway, and naturally, by the name, it is the ridge, so you've got the high ground and you're looking down both east and west as you go along the ridge. So I went along there for a few kilometres, as I say, found a copse, which is just on the ridge, or just off the ridge rather, which has got some evergreen trees, because the camping or bivvying possibilities along the ridge itself wasn't particularly good, with blackberry bushes, hawthorn bushes, blackthorn bushes, and brambles and so on, so not particularly conducive to expensive Goretex fabric or event fabric. I didn't want to stick it down on the prickly stuff. And I came across this little copse of evergreen trees, actually, which has proved quite comfortable. A lot of mulch underfoot, but underground, but much better than the other bivvy I did in a wood, which was pretty wet and soggy. This is not too bad at all. And I've got a bit of shelter from the wind, which is nice. I'm at the wind now. And hopefully, if it does snow, I'll have a bit of snow protection as well. But again, I've got my large backpacking light duo tarp over the top of me, and I've got my Rab Ascent bivvy, which I'm lying on at the moment. I'm using a quilt tonight. I'm going to use my 3-season quilt, the backpacking light quilt. and I am probably going to wear my Prism Primaloft trousers and my Primaloft Rab generator smock for additional insulation if it's going to be as cold as they anticipate. Usually I find halfway through the night I strip off because I'm just too hot, but we'll see how we get on with that. So just for people who are interested, that's a 3-season quilt inside a bivvy bag, obviously under the tarp. And my sleeping mat is just a 3/4 Thermarest, the ProLite one. So it's the thinner ProLite Thermarest, not the thick Neo Air. And once again, we'll see how we get on with that. Now, munchies, food. Yes, I didn't do particularly well on the preparation front on the food styles. I've brought my little pocket stove and I'm testing a new meth stove, actually, which only received yesterday from Tokes, which looks pretty good. It fits inside the pocket stove nicely, gives off a generous heat, and it works really well in conjunction with that. So if I get the need to have a hot drink or some food, I shall whip that on and get that going. And obviously I'm surrounded by twigs and so on, so I could actually have it as a wood-burning stove as well. But I've got to be cautious because obviously I am in a woodland, even though it is winter time. But at the moment, it's, as I say, just gone 5:30. I'm just warming up now and feeling much better than I did half an hour or so ago. I'll probably just have a lie down and a rest for a bit, actually, and then I might actually wake up again or whatever and have a brew, get a hot drink inside me tonight, and then get my head down and try and get off early tomorrow morning to get back down to Avebury and go into much more detail about the stones and some of the history that's down there. Before I do all that, I suppose I just want to thank everybody that has partaken of the survey that we're running. We're running it for the next couple of months. That's through to March, to the end of March 2015, to get some listener feedback and to find out what people are enjoying, what they would like to improve, what their thoughts are on the podcast. We've not done it before, and so far over 100 people have taken part, so thank you very much if you're one of those. I really appreciate it. It's been really interesting, some of the comments that we've been receiving, and it's all helping me visualise what we're going to be doing with the outdoor station over the next 12 months and the sort of direction we can move in, which will keep everybody happy. But on the whole, we seem to have pretty well hit the mark, which is nice. And obviously I'd like to do more if I could, but it'd just be nice to make sure whatever I do is the right type of thing for the listeners. So, as you can probably hear in the background, it's pretty quiet. I've had the occasional pheasant. The stars are actually out. I'm looking up at the stars and the crescent moon at the moment. So I think I'll get myself all ready in the bivvy bag and snuggle down, get warmed up. And of course, if I do have a brew a bit later on and have any words of wisdom or any other exciting things happen during the night, any visitors by animals, I'll switch on and let you hear it. But in the meantime, I'm going to bury myself into the bivvy bag and get warm. Well, good morning everyone. It is just turned 7 o'clock, and on the whole I had a pretty good night. The update on the weather is it was pretty boring actually. It got very, very cold towards midnight, 1 o'clock, and I expected the frost and the snow, but nothing transpired, and it sort of got slightly milder. I'm still seeing my breath in front of my mouth as I speak. So it is chilly, but not the predicted snow, frost or ice that I was expecting. On the whole, I had a reasonable night. Thankfully, the wind was the trees were catching the wind. I could hear the wind in the tree tops, but nothing really affected me, so it was nothing too disturbing. You know, one of those strange feelings where you can't decide whether you were dreaming or not. I'm sure about 1 o'clock, 1:30, a couple of dogs came by and literally stuck its nose into the bivvy bag, which sort of woke me up. And I'm pretty sure it wasn't a dream, because I heard a couple of voices talking in the distance, and obviously it was a couple of people walking down the Ridgeway, and there were a couple of dogs with them. He sort of came to after I sort of woke up and looked around and think, did that really happen? So obviously I was fairly sound asleep, which gives an indication of how comfortable it was. Been very comfortable warmth-wise. The quilt's been fine. Actually, interestingly, it's the first time I've used a quilt inside a bivvy bag, and it just didn't move. It just stayed put. So without having to pin it down or clip it to the base, it was fine. So every time I turned over, that was good. And I survived as regards temperature-wise with the Montaigne Prism Primaloft trousers and the Rab Generator smock. I chose to have synthetic. Just in case things got a little bit wet inside the bivvy bag from condensation, as sometimes can happen. But it didn't happen at all. The bag's perfectly dry inside and out, and although when the flap of the bivvy bag did fall across my face, I woke up every now and again with the moisture created from breathing on that. But I'm glad to say my little pocket stove and mess burner has done the trick. The water is boiling away merrily. So I'm about to have myself a nice hot chocolate and get one of these instant packet breakfasts ready and throw in a load of dried fruit that I've got and revive my spirits and get sorted out, get packed up, get back on the Ridgeway and start to head towards Avebury again and look at it as morning breaks over this wonderful Neolithic area. I'll try and describe the landscape a bit more this time as well. I think people that haven't been to the area or don't know the UK might struggle to grasp where the village is located and how it sits in the environment. So more of that a bit later on.
You're listening to the award-winning UK Business Podcaster of the Year.
The home of UK-based audio and video podcasts for lovers of the great outdoors everywhere.
Podcasts are based solely around self-powered travel.
This is the Outdoor Station.
Well, I seriously underestimated how cold it was last night. This recording is now being made on the iPhone because the new recorder I brought with me with new batteries I left out for 5 or 10 minutes while I was taking the tarp down, and it killed the batteries. The temperature is so low, it's absolutely bitter. There's been a real strong hoarfrost all over the landscape. It's a real smattering of white across the ridges and down into the valleys and across the fields. And so I was fairly sheltered last night, probably being obviously beneath the trees. But the other side of it was the fact that I was actually really quite toasty by comparison, because I had just walked past some of the spots I had been thinking about camping and pitching out, the ones I mentioned that had hawthorn bushes and so on, and it was covered in a deep, deep frost. So I'm quite glad I didn't do that. But I'm disappointed really, because I did want to describe the landscape before me as the sun was coming up. The sun has now pitched higher up and disappeared behind a cloud, and which is a real shame. So for about 10 minutes, 15 minutes, as I was walking along the Ridgeway, I'm just turned off it now. I'm just starting to head down into Avebury. It's like looking across the landscape. I would describe it as just gently undulating. It's like a patchwork blanket, gently laid across a slightly undulating bed. The different shades of green, the different patches, all sort of hemmed off with the fences and barriers and posts and small little copses of evergreen trees. As you look down into Avebury, you can just sort of make out the ring of the dyke that goes around it. And then off into the distance, just seeing the top of Silbury Hill. But I can't quite see the barrow that I visited yesterday, so that's tucked behind another little hillock. But as the sun was, as I say, coming up and casting its warmth across me and lighting up the valley below, it really was a magnificent sight. And you could sort of appreciate what the old drovers must have seen when they came across this road. Transferring their stock along the national trail, looking down into the different valleys, probably looking for a hostelry to go and get some mead or cider or whatever was the ale of their choice in those days. But yeah, it's quite a romantic route. I also noticed this national trail actually is a cycle route as well, so any people who are into do mountain biking, it's pretty good underfoot. So it'd make a lovely 83 or 85 mile trail if you ever fancy doing that on a mountain bike, and obviously camping or pitching into B&B on the way. Anyway, the sun has just appeared again from behind that cloud, which has just given me a little bit more enthusiasm to beetle on. Although I had some breakfast when I was in camp, I think I shall obviously head down and find a coffee house and somewhere I can find some new batteries as well to revert back to the other recorder and get back onto that track. So looking over my shoulder now, yeah, it's dull. Wherever the sunshine isn't reaching, it's still fairly dull and dark, but it's a lovely image. And I've taken a few pictures of this morning and the view and the frost as well. So if you do have a chance to check it out, have a look on the Outdoor Station website and you'll get more of an idea of the landscape that I'm so poorly trying to describe. So anyway, back down to Avebury. Let's see if we can get a hot cup of coffee or a hot cup of tea and have a look at some of these stones and talk about the history. Well, the morning has moved on, and as you'll probably hear in a minute, there are crows perched in the high trees that are within the Avebury Henge boundary. And I've discovered that it wasn't flat batteries earlier on, it was actually operator error. So hopefully the piece in between getting up this morning and getting down here has been recorded correctly on the iPhone and transferred. But I'm standing by one of the stones in the circle, and there's 330 of them. It gives you an idea of what sort of size it is. As I say, people probably in the UK may be aware of it, and if you haven't visited, you have got no idea what you're missing. People overseas, you'll be completely gobsmacked when I start revealing some of the information, and perhaps you visit the website or just start looking it up on Google. It is an incredible place. Of course, modern day, it does in fact have a main road running through it, which is obviously, it came about over a period of time as the ownership of the area changed. But I thought one of the best ways to introduce it is with this brief introduction that's in the actual guidebook, which I've been referring to, which is fairly concise, and perhaps it'll be much better than me waffling, trying to explain the importance and the sheer scale of it. So here goes. Avebury is not Britain's most well-known stone circle, but being 14 times the size of Stonehenge, it is undoubtedly the greatest. Situated in the heart of the county of Wiltshire, Avebury is much more than just a stone circle. Within the 100 or so stones that once made up the outer circle were two inner circles, each with their own special feature. And enclosing all of this is a monumental ditch and bank earthwork known as a henge. It has 4 causewayed entrances, and leading from at least 2 of these were long stone avenues of paired stones, one of which I'll be walking along when I go back to the car later on today. If this were not enough, Avebury is deeply connected to the surrounding landscape, which is some of the most important prehistoric sites in Britain. Within a radius of just 1.5 miles are Windmill Hill, Silbury Hill, I mentioned yesterday, West Kennet Barrow, where I visited yesterday, and the Sanctuary, and that's at the end of the avenue, which I may or may not get to. The large and mysterious mound of Silbury Hill is probably better known, as it can be seen from the busy main road south of Avebury, and it's not far from the ancient burial tomb known as West Kennet Barrow, which lies on the opposite side of the road. And lastly, there's the Sanctuary. This is to the south-east of Avebury and was connected to the stone circle by the longest stone avenue in Britain. As well as these major sites, there are a multitude of Bronze Age round barrows, and this makes Avebury one of the most complete prehistoric complexes in Europe. Because of its international significance, the Avebury landscape was made a World Heritage Site, together with Stonehenge, in 1986. The 9 square miles it covers contains more than 330 known archaeological sites. The prehistoric people who built the circles and surrounding monuments were not just concerned with their daily survival, but had a culture that could organise these magnificent feats of engineering. Over the years, many archaeologists have tried to uncover the history of the place. Within recent years, technology has allowed us to see below the ground without digging, using geophys survey, with amazing results. Despite this, more questions are often raised than answered. However, it was obviously an extremely important gathering place. Very little Neolithic domestic rubbish was found here, so it was assumed that it was not a dwelling place, but more likely used for ritual purposes. It was perhaps a great temple for people who lived in close harmony with their natural environment, and ceremonies that related to the seasons and fertility are thought to have been practiced here. Today, visitors come from all over the world. They are able to freely walk between the stones and imagine for themselves the events that took place. I'm standing by one of the stones at the moment, which is, well, almost twice the size of me. I'm 6'2", and I should imagine weighs, 10, 15, 20 tonnes perhaps. But apparently the largest stone, known as the Cove, is estimated to weigh over 100 tonnes. And all these stones were shifted by man, presumably with no machinery, from miles away and erected in these various circles over a period of time. It's an incredible feat, and even if you tried to do that today, just imagine how many computers and technicians you would use just simply designating where the stones are, getting them from A to B, finding a hole and digging the hole to the right depth to suit the stone size and weight so it didn't topple, getting it into the hole and erecting it. And we're talking, as I say, a couple of hundred over a period of time, or possibly more. I think it was 300 or so, with the avenue and the other sites around. So anyway, I'm going to wander over towards the Cove, which is only a 5-minute walk, and when I get there, I'm just going to briefly look at the history of Avebury. I could go on about this for forever. It is absolutely fascinating, and I find it more fascinating just when, as I say, just about the sheer logistics, the man hours. These ditches, they're huge. They're huge now, but they used to be, apparently, 30 feet deep. That is an awful lot of earth to move with an antler's pick. There's estimates of how many man hours and what sort of number of men were put to task on this. But it is a massive undertaking. And I can't imagine, even with today's technology, this being a simple job that you'd complete in a short period of time. It's no wonder this draws people from all over the world with all sorts of different interests. But anyway, I'm going to head over to the Cove and share a bit of the history, and then we'll head along the avenue back towards the sanctuary, which is not far from where the car's parked. So that's how I'm going to spend the morning. So I've gone a stage further now. I've crossed over the road, as you can hear in the background. The crows are still around me, and the sheep are literally just a few feet away, enjoying the early shoots of spring, I guess. But I'm standing next to the Cove, and this is the largest stone, I think, from research they've discovered, the largest stone. And I'll read you a little bit more about it before I actually go back into the history of the area. As I say, once you start delving into this, you get more and more engrossed. I'm standing in the northeast quadrant, and behind the buildings are two large megaliths standing at right angles to each other. This is the Cove, and once made up a 3-stone set with the open side facing northeast. This is the direction that the sun rises on the longest day of the year. An outlying stone is thought to have been aligned so its long shadow would penetrate the Cove, observing the moment of solstice. This symbolic event indicates that fertility rites were practiced here. If we consider the circle to symbolise the female gender, then the obelisk circle must surely represent the male. Over the last 100 years, the broader stone of the Cove, the one where I'm standing next to, which I have to say is at about 2.5 times my height, began to lean to a point where it was in danger of falling. While straightening it and setting it into concrete to secure its future, it was discovered that it was much larger than previously thought. It extends for another 3 metres below ground, making it the largest megalith in Avebury, weighing about 100 tonnes. It is incredible that this one was the first features of Avebury. Of this circle of 27 stones that surround the Cove, only 4 are still visible, 2 are standing, and the other 2 have fallen. In 2003, a geophys survey was carried out, which confirmed that there are still as many 15 stones lying underground in the eastern side of the circle. The survey clearly defined the size and shape of these megaliths and their original positions, but at present there are no plans to physically re-erect them. Incredible, isn't it? But look at this stone, 100 tonnes, and it's not got a flat side on it. So this idea of you have a bunch of guys with ropes, pulling this along over logs to act as wheels, and they just keep replacing the logs one after the other as you move forward. I just can't see it myself. There must be, if they're intelligent enough to create this circle and this ditch and this entire area, then surely they must have other means that we haven't considered to shift these sort of things. I've taken a photograph of it. Have a look at it on the website. There's a picture with it, with my rucksack and walking poles leaning against it to give you an idea of the size. As I say, I could carry on going on and on and on about this place. It is phenomenal. But I will do a little bit of history because I think it's quite interesting how it was discovered and what happened to it before it became the massive tourist attraction that it is now.
To subscribe to our show, please follow the instructions on our website or search for us in the iTunes directory.
Okay, so let's just have a quick brief history, because I think this is fascinating in itself and says an awful lot about us as a people or as a nation. Apparently, Avebury was first recognised as a prehistoric site by the antiquarian John Aubrey in 1649, who discovered it while hunting. He wrote that he was wonderfully surprised at the sight of those vast stones of which I had never heard before. Over the following years, he recorded many details about the site for his famous but unpublished Monumenta Britannica book. King Charles II heard of the site and, accompanied by Aubrey, visited it on his way to Bath in 1663. He commanded Aubrey to dig to see if he could find bones. However, Aubrey did not dig, but speculated instead on the ancient Britons who built Avebury. Let us imagine what kind of country this was in the time of ancient Britons. They were 2 or 3 degrees, I suppose, less savage than the Americans. Aubrey's appreciation of a primitive prehistoric Britain was the earliest account of what had until then been a mixture of fantasy and classical mythology. He considered Avebury to be the premier ancient site in Britain, and wrote that it does as much exceed in greatness the so renowned Stonehenge as a cathedral doeth a parish church. 60 years later, from 1719 to 1724, Avebury was again the focus of antiquarian study, when William Stukely, doctor and clergyman, came to Avebury to study and record the place. And he described it in similar glowing terms. A stupendous temple at Avebury, the most august work at this day upon the globe of earth. During the intervening years between Aubrey and Stukely, Avebury had been massively damaged by local builders, breaking the stones and dragging them from their original sockets. The stones were broken into pieces by digging pits, lighting huge great straw fires around them, and then pouring cold water on the stones to crack them. This had devastated the previously well-preserved circles. Stukely arrived at a time when the village within the circle was growing rapidly, and larger, better-built houses were required. Many of the stone buildings, houses, church, manor, and field walls, were built of the broken stones. Stukely recorded in detail where the stones had been and wrote, "Since I frequented the place, I fear it has suffered, but at the time there was scarce a single stone in the original plot wanting, but I could trace it to the person then living who demolished it, and to what use and where." So this guy had obviously recorded the damage and where all the stones went, which was fantastic. Now let's move on to a good few years later. It's unfortunate that not all of Avebury's 154 stones, which people have assumed were quarried and transported on wooden rollers, have survived. Of the 3 rings in the avenue that make up the henge, only 36 stones are still standing. Many were destroyed or buried, as we have just said, some still are, in massive pits during the 14th century by devout local Christians because A, they believed them to be harbingers of ill luck, and B, to eradicate pagan worship from the monument. Good old Christians, that's what they did all over the place, all over the UK. You can often find a standing stone actually as part of the old church foundations. That was the way they used to assimilate the pagans towards Christianity. Religion, don't you just love it? It was during the 18th century that the stones came under attack once more, not from zealous Christians this time, but from local construction workers who decided it would be a jolly good idea to utilise the stones to construct several of the cottages in the village. The grand 15th century Tudor manor and the modernisation of the 12th century church of St James. Some of these magnificent stones even went to cobble the streets of Devizes 7 miles to the south. So when was it saved? How was it saved? Well, miraculously, it was saved by a man who made his money of all things, marmalade. How British is that? It wasn't until the intervention and purchase of the site by marmalade tycoon and archaeologist Alexander Keeler in the 1930s that the destruction ceased. Keeler was responsible for much of the conservation and re-erection of the stones. His work was interrupted during the outbreak of World War II and remains unfinished to this day. Unfinished because there are still stones which lay buried. So bless this guy, in the 1930s, started restoring the stones. Because of the original notes made by the earlier historians, he managed to trace back the stones and where the parts had gone to build people's hedges or walls or whatever, and actually started reassembling the stones. And it's thanks to him we have Avebury as it is today. In fact, the site where I'm standing now, next to the this huge great stone, was covered in sheds and garages and was a village. So he got the village cleared as he bought the entire site, and there's only a couple of buildings thankfully remaining. But obviously, as I said to you, sadly there is a road that runs through it, quite a busy main road as well. And I wonder what these thousands of people think each day every time they drive through and pass Silbury Hill. So that's just a brief introduction to Avebury. There is so much more you can find, so much more you can read. Do have a look it up on the internet. If you're ever in the UK, if you're outside the UK, do make a point of coming to see it. It's free. You can't wish to see anything that's more stimulating for the mind and for history itself than this. And as I say, the Ridgeway, I'm looking up at the Ridgeway at the moment, about a couple of miles away along a track, and then you're onto another ancient route which runs for 80 odd miles. So it's a super place to come and visit. Well, time's marching on now. It is a pleasant winter's morning, blue sky, clouds, a bit of sunshine, a bit of warmth from the sun, but not much because there's a bitter cold wind fighting it. I'm going to make my way over to the avenue now, which is this line of stones that leads away from the Avebury Circle. I did think I'd go to Silbury, but I walked past Silbury yesterday, I took some pictures of it, and it is a very, very interesting construction. The size of the pyramids, the Great Pyramids, apparently it's the biggest man-made construction of its type in the UK. And what I'm going to do is, as I wander over there, I'm going to read you a bit of information about Silbury Hill, which is equally fascinating. And the bottom line is, nobody knows why it was built. The largest man-made mound in Europe, the mysterious Silbury Hill, compares in height and volume to the roughly contemporary Egyptian pyramids. Probably completed in around 2400 BC, it apparently contains no burial. Though clearly important in itself, its purpose and significance remain unknown. Of all the historical landmarks spread throughout the British Isles, Silbury Hill is one of the most remarkable. Accepted as the largest man-made mound in the pre-industrial Europe, it has a symmetry that makes it seem almost modern. On seeing it for the first time, the uninformed visitor can get quite a surprise on learning of its antiquity. At 130 feet high and covering an area in excess of 5 acres, the enormous contours of the hill still challenge us with the mystery of why it was built and what for. But the solution to the mystery of how it has survived for 4,500 years without eroding away has been known from some of the early excavations. The uppermost part was built as a series of drums, each getting progressively smaller in diameter with increasing height. Each drum is about 17 feet in height, with the outer wall leaning in at an angle for added stability. The inside of each drum consists of a series of radial walls, similar to a spider's web or dartboard, which divide the drums into compartments, each of which are filled with chalk, the walls themselves having been built with chalk blocks. A survey of the hill indicates that the drums are more in the form of polyhedra than circular, and may have been built in such a way as to allow the steps to form a spiral trackway leading to its summit. The construction of Silbury demonstrates a high level of sophistication. This produces a further mystery. How did the knowledge of building in this way arrive at Avebury? Surrounding the base of the hill is an extensive ditch, which is elongated on the western flank. It is believed that this may have been deliberately filled with water when Silbury was first constructed. A number of tunnels have been dug into the hill over the years, commencing in 1776 when the Duke of Northumberland employed Cornish tin miners to sink a shaft from the top of the hill. In 1849, the Archaeological Institute tunnelled in from the side. In 1922, the famous Egyptologist Sir Flinders Petrie excavated the base of the mound in search of the suspected burial chamber entrance. Lastly, in 1968, the BBC and Cardiff University dug another tunnel into the centre of the hill. No burial or treasure was ever found, just horizontal layers of chalk and rubble, along with valuable structural and construction data to add more fuel to the mystery. Although the various tunnels and excavations over the years have failed to produce any solution as to the purpose of Silbury, they have revealed that the hill was built in 3 stages, starting with a primary mound about 16 feet high and 120 feet in diameter. Accurate dating for the construction has proved difficult to achieve, but carbon dating some of the antler pick remains found within the 3 phases indicated it started around 2600 BC and was completed around 2400 BC, which predates the building of Avebury's stone avenues by about a century. The year of its birth may never be accurately known with any certainty, but evidence obtained from the remnants of insects which were found in the hill's base layer indicate that the building of Silbury probably commenced during the month of August. There is evidence that a substantial Roman building once existed adjacent to the base of the hill on its southern side, and further surveys have now revealed that an extensive Roman settlement surrounded the road adjacent to the hill. Quite what the Romans thought about Silbury poses an interesting question. They certainly used it as a marker when constructing the adjacent road, which now forms the base of the modern highway. Though it is hard to imagine that it didn't play a more substantial role in their lives at some time. During 2007, a massive project to stabilise the hill was undertaken. This is a result of the damage caused by the various tunnels that have left substantial voids over the years. The work has allowed archaeologists access to the hill's interior, and much fresh information has been obtained as a result. Hopefully a more precise understanding of the construction and chronology will be the outcome. A very interesting development has been the discovery of sarsen stones within the hill, which suggests that it conceals a megalithic structure of some sort. It is considered that the remains of a stone circle might also be one possibility. Whatever motivated its builders, Silbury Hill remains one of the most astonishing achievements of that period. It is estimated that with the tools assumed to be available at the time, it would take 18 million man-hours to complete. That is to say, 700 men working solidly for 10 years. The amount of labour it required reveals that the population of the Avebury region at the time was large and able to form a cohesive workforce. If the purpose of Silbury could be understood, perhaps the meaning of Avebury as a whole would be much clearer. And yet, a few thousand cars drive right past it every single day and never give it a second glance. So, turning back from the West Kennet Avenue, where I'm now heading, and looking back at Avebury itself, it's such a shame that obviously over the years it got developed and during the Middle Ages turned into a complete village and decimated and the stones taken apart. But bless that Keeler for putting it back together again and creating what truly would have been one of the wonders of the world, I should imagine, in its heyday. So, I'm walking away from Avebury along West Kennet Avenue. The first third of the avenue has been excavated and restored, and many of the original stones can be seen. Stone 19 the last one before the avenue crosses the road, has some interesting axe sharpening marks apparently. The next portion of the avenue now lies buried beneath cornfields, and the southern portion of the avenue has been badly damaged by the A4 road widening, and there is little to be seen today. What a shame. The National Trust is working towards a route which will allow you to walk the line of the avenue up to the sanctuary. Wow, really is quite impressive, and emotional too. Emotional to know that this is a part of ancient Britain that for all our technology and clever ways, we still know very, very little about. We can make assumptions, and as I say, a lot of people have made massive assumptions about shifting these stones. 100 tons pulled by a dozen guys with leather ropes on wooden trunks. I can't see it myself. And I'm looking up at the Ridgeway at the moment, and that's a lovely, magnificent walk. Or cycle ride. Cycle route number 45, apparently. Absolutely amazing. What were they all for? What were they all for? Well, I think I've probably rambled on enough about this on this particular podcast. I hope it's been of interest in some format to you. If you've not heard of Avebury before, then please do make a visit. It's well worth it. I'd say try and come out of main tourist season because it's probably going to be heaving. But unlike Stonehenge, it is free, and you can get in and touch the stones and hug the stones and do your dowsing or whatever it is you want to do, and become one with ancient Britain. In the meantime, if you haven't filled out our survey, I'd be very grateful if you could partake and just let me know your thoughts about what we do and what we could possibly do, and whether it actually fits in with your interests. It would be very, very useful, and I'll reveal the results of the survey after the end of March when it finishes. So until next time, folks, thanks very much for listening. I hope you enjoyed this wild camp. Perhaps it's been a bit bitty, but I've done my best. Until next time, long live ancient Britain, eh? Bye for now.
Thank you for listening to this podcast. To hear or see more from our extensive free library, please visit theoutdoorstation.co.uk.